Welcome to Intergalactic Tarboush, Eclectic Conversations from the Mena with Iyad al-Baghdadi and me, Ahmed Gafnash.
Hey Ahmed.
Hey Iyad,
How you doing,
how's it
man?
going? Good, thanks, you.
So, what is this?
This is something we've been meaning to do for a very long time, and we've had a few false starts on, which is basically to start recording our chats because, they're so interesting that I'd probably listen back to them myself.
You know, like our chats are extremely eclectic, and I mean the idea is to make this a podcast, right?
Yeah.
When did you get the idea?
A year ago, a year and something, and we've basically been so distracted by other priorities since then that we haven't had the chance.
I mean the thing is when we talk, we're jumping topics so much. I mean, I'm thinking like we could go from the evolution of gorillas to crypto to post-capitalist economics to our workout routine to cooking tips in like the course of like 10 minutes.
Yeah, I can see that you've got the evolution of gorillas on your knowledge base today, so I want to hear about that.
Well, I mean, let's start with the knowledge base, the concept of a knowledge base, because I mean, about what is it, like a year and a half ago, we started using a piece of software called Rome Research, and we kind of describe it as, I mean, for both of us, it was like really a big jump in our ability to really consume information, right? It was you who found it. But, we have been like looking for something like that for such a long time. So like maybe we start from there.
Yeah, shout out to Connor for being the savior, I guess, because we had been looking for this for years and we're now both completely obsessed with it and addicted to it. But this is where we store all of our reading notes. It's where we do our thinking. And because of the way it's structured, it connects everything. In the same structure as your brain, like with the neurons connecting at different concepts as networks. So you just have loads and loads of serendipity and you end up with notes on the same topic that you wrote months or even years ago being surfaced. Can get weird sometimes.
I mean, I did notice that I actually write a lot. I never publish it, but I write a lot. And a lot of the time, it's kind of like half baked, half, it's not really publishing material, but it's just notes and notes and notes.
There's no polish. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, this is how we kind of get to the evolution of gorillas, because I mean, completely, this is completely random, of course. It's just that I was, so there is this...
I love how natural you thought that segue was. This is how we get to the evolution of gorillas.
I mean, this is natural for us, right? I mean... So I'll tell you why I got to this topic, right? So there is this science... there's someone out there listening thinking, what does this have to do with anti-authoritarianism? Yeah, because I mean, it's a weird thing, but I have been thinking about this topic I've been thinking about history really, but then I'll come back to that. Let me just tell you how I got on gorillas. There was this popularizer of science who mostly does content in the Arabic language. I don't think she's very well known outside of the Arabic realm. Her name is Salam Katanani. I think she's Jordanian, living in the United Arab Emirates. And she's been doing a lot of really interesting material. I mean, really good material for the Arabic language. And like one of her recent posts was about, I think she posted a clip of essentially, it's an imaginary clip, of course, of Australopithecus, which is basically one of our evolutionary ancestors before we became Homo, before the species became human, right? And I think she commented on that, and she's like, these are human beings, 3 million years ago or something like that. And I think she got like a torrent of abuse on Instagram from everybody who's like, their idea is that, this is religiously implausible, or even like it's blasphemy to even say that. On the other hand, I was thinking, wait a minute, Australopithecus wasn't human. It was an ape. It says that in the name, Australopithecus, right? Australo means southern, Pithecus is ape. The first human is probably Homo erectus, right? 2 million years ago, 1.9 million years ago. But that got me into like this query about when did we branch off from gorillas? And the answer is somewhere between 8 to 10 million years ago, which is why I think that from an evolutionary perspective, we're actually closer to chimpanzees than to gorillas. Completely different. I mean, I know this is like the story doesn't make sense, but this is where we are.
Yeah, you mentioned religious sentiment, and I've tried to dig into this before because people do get upset and they do use religious reasoning, but I don't think that's the reason because, okay, you can disagree with the reason, but there's nothing inherently offensive about it unless you've been raised to feel some kind of offense. It's like someone basically told you your mother's a chimpanzee or something.
The interesting thing is that we don't know our own tradition. By the way, this is very normal for us when we move from a really serious topic to a political topic to a religious topic. But then, yeah, these are kind of the things that we geek out on. It's interesting that in the Shia tradition, there are lots of references to this idea that the scriptural Adam is not the first human. That what is being described is a spiritual father of humanity rather than a biological father of humanity. And there is actually let me look it up. Give me a second. So this is the good thing about having 171 tabs open.
That just sounds horrifying.
So I'm reading an article written in Arabic, also written from a religious perspective, mind you, from the Shia tradition, that says Adam laysa awwal al-bashar. Adam was not the first human. And apparently this cites Muslim thinkers from 320 Hijri. When you want to convert, I guess you have to add 620 years. 381 Hijri, 606 Hijri, going back to things that were mentioned among the early Imams, Ja'far al-Sadiq, etc., was this idea that before Adam there was a million Adams. I found that interesting. The whole idea that in the Muslim tradition we don't really have a problem. Traditionally we didn't have a problem with the concept of evolution. And we can talk about this later, I think, whenever it comes up. But apparently now we do. And I don't know when we started to make a big fuss about this.
Yeah, I think somewhere along the line we basically became defensive about science and decided, either colonialists decided to pit them against each other first, or we did it as a backlash, but we basically started to assert religion against science rather than alongside it.
So what's in your notes? I mean, you have notes of. I mean, I don't know why you put this in the plan, but you wanted to speak about Éric Zemmour.
Yeah. So before that, on the topic of early Christianity, did you know that early Christianity had a 40% growth rate per decade for the first 300 years?
Wow! For the first what?
300 years.
300. Wow.
350 years, I think.
I mean, you got to ask yourself. What is it in the moment that made it gain so many supporters in such a short period of time to have such momentum for 300 years? It's I didn't really consider it.
But I don't think that would look like very much like coronavirus growth rates. I don't think that would look very shocking in the early stages.
But you're talking about 300 years. You're talking year by year, year over year.
No, I think 40% growth per decade.
Per decade. That's still very impressive. Yeah. I mean, that's still very, very, very fast. I mean, and of course, the most. This is basically under Roman times, so it was mostly within the Roman realm, right? Which kind of raises a question of the spread. I mean, did Christianity spread beyond the Roman region? I don't know. I mean, I haven't studied that.
I think it puts into question a lot of the dynamics of transmission as well. Like I'm wondering whether it was individuals or whether you'd have like communal conversions, whether it spread between adjacent geographical locations or it was, you know, much more widespread. It's really interesting to contemplate.
Yeah. I mean, you know, earlier before we started the episode, we were discussing your knowledge base, and you're like, everything on my knowledge base is either too political or too far down the crypto rabbit hole. I mean, and that's the thing. We have been thinking about really weird things. In the end, we are building an organization which is focused on the future of the Middle East and North Africa, and of course, by extension, the future of the world. And we are activists. We are very intensely interested in the cause of liberty and democracy. But we end up, a lot of our conversations end up about, you know, crypto and Bitcoin and psychedelics, and of course the world order and nationalism and China and religion and stuff like that. But I guess we have a very different take on what it means to be activists.
Yeah, especially over the last couple of years, where I felt like a lot of the activist community has just been putting the blinders on more and more. And meanwhile, we've been becoming more and more eclectic to the point where some people are like, why the hell are you interested in all of this stuff? We're like doing campaigns.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's always this feeling of disconnect. I've been feeling it more now, to be honest. Like when I'm meeting, because for 2 years you're not meeting people, right? Like during the pandemic and stuff. So, and before Omicron,
and then you meet people and you realize how weird you got.
Kind of like that, because before Omicron, there was a window where we could travel, right? It seemed like, you know, the fog is lifting. And so I did meet with a few people that I haven't met for many years, for several years, and since 2019, 2018. Like before the pandemic, or even longer before the pandemic. And I started to realize that some people are exactly where they were 2 years, 3 years ago, and haven't really, I mean, their theories of change and their worldviews have not accounted for what happened, you know, since the Trump years. I mean, meanwhile for us, we really spent 2 years strategizing, really.
Yeah, and I think that shows in the kind of topics we're thinking about now versus then. There's been a lot of progress and evolution. We're definitely not having the same conversations as we were 2 years ago.
So tell me about your notes about Éric Zemmour, because you know, the second time I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, I've just been really fascinated, like in the same way that you'd be fascinated, like seeing a train come off the rails in front of you, like morbid fascination. There's a lot of parallels being drawn between his campaign and the Trump campaign, because a lot of people are writing it off as a train wreck. You know, it's kind of hilarious that he's being heckled everywhere he goes, and just as he launches his campaign and he's going all family values and stuff, there's some kind of sex scandal and things like that. But that's exactly what led people to take Trump for granted. When actually Zemmour's rise, like Trump's rise, coinciding with like a really dark moment in the French psyche where, you know, ugly anti-immigrant and anti-Muslim particularly sentiment is coming to the fore. So it's just worrying. And then on top of that, there's the fascinating additional note that this guy is a North African Jew who's like his parents are migrants from Algeria, and you know, he's got such a deep hatred of Muslims that even the traditional far-right leader Marine Le Pen thinks he's extreme.
Yeah, I mean, on that note about him being an Algerian Jew, I'll come back to it, but I just read an article earlier. I think it was, I can't remember the platform, but it's basically saying that he actually does not have connection. He does not have direct connections to France's fascist movements. He is not he's not an ideological descendant or even an organizational descendant from there. He's basically a TV personality, unlike Le Pen. Le Pen is connected to them.
So I think that's the dangerous thing, because like in the same way you could have said Trump isn't like from the legacy of the Ku Klux Klan, but that's the dangerous thing.
Yeah, so this was the conclusion. This was the conclusion of the article. So basically they're like, he represents the French mainstream. This is something within the psyche of French society as it stands at this point of its history. And that you're absolutely right. It's more dangerous.
And then there's this really weird dynamic in France where you have the center, which is really the right, Emmanuel Macron, you know, the superficial liberalism, and beneath some really right-wing policies, especially on France's behaviors in the world, on minorities in France. Then you have the far right, which is Le Pen, and then you have the far right, which is Zemmour, who is like basically even dispatching with the niceties that the far right adopted to try and become more palatable to the electorate. But then you have, on the right of that, you have the centre again, because Macron's Home Affairs Minister a couple of years ago actually accused Zemmour of being too soft on Muslims.
I mean, this is like this point about having an extreme far right, but within normally when we say extreme far right, we mean we're beyond the political window. These are people who are fringe, will never be actually elected into any kind of parliament, right? The idea that you have a center and then the right and then a far right and then the extreme far right and all of them are within the window of electability reminds me so much of what I've been reading about Israeli politics and how Kahanists, who are basically terrorists, are now in the part. You know, they're basically electable now.
They were literally banned in Israel.
I'm not sure if they were they.
They were definitely banned in the US, and some of their leadership were convicted, I think.
I mean, the whole idea is that they are disgusting when it comes even when you talk to left-leaning Israelis, they're disgusted by them. But the idea here is that is this a normal, healthy political spectrum? Because within a normal, healthy political spectrum, you're talking, left, center right, and right. But if it's extending so far out into the right, where is the center anymore? And at the same time, you're going to ask, is this so completely tribalized that the spectrum itself doesn't make sense anymore? Does the political spectrum, the left-right map, even make sense anymore in such political systems?
And then you have to look at what kind of pull they're having on each other within the system, because I read an argument that what Zemmour is actually doing is making Le Pen seem far, far more palatable, because suddenly she isn't the most extreme thing on the menu. She's like something in the middle between Macron and Zemmour.
What do you think will happen? Do you think this will split? He will take some votes from Le Pen, and that will benefit Macron.
Yeah, but the French system has a second round, so ultimately it'll be the top two, and it'll basically be someone
right. Because then you can have the opposite of that, because what you get really in that case, what you get is that if Zemmour doesn't make it to the second round, Le Pen does, and then she gets all of Zemmour's votes because he was eliminated, which is a scary possibility.
Yeah, and then on the other side, looking at what effect they have on each other, Macron basically pivots to the right every time there's even a whiff of an election. You can basically set your clock by how extreme Macron's policies towards Muslims are. You can determine how far out the next election is.
I mean, an interesting thing is that I think just a few days ago, or was it a few weeks ago? I can't remember the date, but who was the previous president? What's his name?
Hollande?
Sarkozy.
Oh yeah.
He was found guilty, he was convicted for breaking campaign finance laws during his 2012 bid, which he lost.
When he took a bribe, when he took payments from Gaddafi?
I'm not sure which one this is, because apparently there's multiple. It's almost like there is actually a long history of dark money in French politics, because there was also that story about how Le Pen was basically accepting money from the UAE through some kind of intermediary.
Yeah.
So it seems that there is a history of that and dark money in French politics. I don't think Sarkozy is the only one who's in trouble. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I found this really fascinating. The fact that dictatorship money isn't unheard of. I mean, there's been other discussions of African dictators sending plane loads of cash to finance elections in France. But the other thing is that apparently being actually convicted of incitement to hatred is not considered disqualificatory in France, because Zemmour's had that more than once, actual convictions.
Yeah, he was.
Thanks for listening. To support us, please leave us a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can find the link to our Patreon in the episode description. See you next time.